All right, so I sent out the agenda, but I'll just go over that really quick. So first, I just thought we should open with some quick introductions. I know that Jennifer here is new and doesn't know any of us, and I'm new to the group, so I don't know. There's some of you that I haven't met yet either. So if you just want to start with that, I already introduced myself, so you guys know a little bit about me. Let's see, if you just want to go down the list and just do a really quick introduction so people can just put a name to their face, that'd be great. Gary, do you want to get started first?
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm Gary Joseph and I live in Arizona. And, my full-time job, my day job, I'm a judge, and I also teach over at Eastern Arizona College, and I teach this course. So.
Great, thank you. And I think Matt, you're next. If everyone can see that list on the side, you can just use that to figure where you're in the lineup.
Okay, can you hear me now? Did I get my mic working okay? Okay. I've been teaching at BYU, Idaho for, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years now, it seems like. My full-time occupation is I teach high school at Mountain Home High School. I'm on the city council, and I'm retired Air Force. That's kind of me in a nutshell.
Cool.
All right, thank you. Art?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you.
Okay, great. My name's Art Dale. Calling from Mapleton, Utah. My full-time job is I work for the state of Utah for the Fire Marshal's Office, where I manage the state hazmat and counter-nuclear terrorism program. I teach at 2 other online schools, American Military University and Columbia Southern University. So I've been doing the online instruction since 2010.
All right, thank you. And Elizabeth Larson, she's joining us. She's the AIM for our group. So you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great, Elizabeth.
So hi everybody, I am the AIM for the group, which means that I'm basically Erica's TGL. I teach Sociology 323, which is race and ethnicity. I love teaching that class, and I love being here with you guys for American Foundations. That's such a fun class, and I majored in social studies teaching in college, so it's stuff that I had learned a lot of. I live in Pleasant Grove, Utah, so yeah, I'm happy to be here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, and Erica Nelson, if you just want to introduce yourself real quick, that'd be great.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm Erica Nelson. I'm from American Fork, Utah. I actually was born and raised in Pleasant Grove, though, so we have something in common. I have been teaching this class, I think this is my 4th year, and my day job is actually just being a mom. So it's like it's a little bit intimidating because you guys all have much more impressive day jobs than chasing 5 kids around, but that's what I do. That's me.
Just being a mom. I only have 2, but chasing 5 just seems a lot more a lot more work than what I'm doing. So don't ever say just a mom. I think that you're doing probably a lot more good than you think you are. Okay, and next, let's see. Oh, everything just got shuffled around. I think Jennifer, we haven't heard from you yet.
Okay, I'm Jennifer Jensen. I live in Draper. I have 5 kids too, but my youngest is a senior in high school, so I don't have a lot to do anymore, at least with little kids. I was mostly a mom too. But while my kids were little, I went back to school and got my master's and then my PhD in constitutional studies. So then I taught part-time at a little liberal arts college here in Salt Lake, and now I'm joining with you guys. So this is my very first semester, but I've taught this kind of stuff for a long time, the same sort of ideas, probably more in depth. Like we didn't do an overview class like this, we did more in-depth classes. You know, just, we didn't really do an overview, if that makes sense. So, but it's really, I love it. It's really great, and so far so good. So.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, I think that's one thing I struggle with is that just keeping in mind that this is an overview because every single lesson I feel like there's something missing or something I need to add. So keeping that in mind is definitely a challenge for me. Okay, and I think we got to everybody except for Vic. Vic, you want to take a minute?
Hi, everybody. I'm Vic Garcia. I live in the Austin, Texas area. I've been teaching at BYU Idaho since 2010. Answered an ad on LinkedIn. I think I was one of the first 300 or 400 online instructors that was hired. For my full-time job, I'm in sales. I'm with a commercial AV company called Ford Audio Video. And I also have 5 kids. They're all gone. I just sent my last one to BYU. She's up there right now. Delighted to join y'all. Erica, you're doing a great job so far.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. This is my first meeting, and so hopefully everything goes smooth. I know it's probably a risky move using a brand new program for my first meeting, but actually Elizabeth had her meeting using it, and I really enjoyed it. So I figured now is probably the time to make the switch. It's probably just tear that Band-Aid off and get to it. So, okay, next up on our agenda, I actually just asked Elizabeth to share a quick thought on the semester theme. I skimmed over it, but I haven't had a lot of time to really look into it. So hopefully Elizabeth can share a little bit of her insight. So, all right, the time is yours, Elizabeth.
All right, I'm going to share my screen so I can show what some of it looks like on our community website. So I'm going to click the button and hope that it works. All right, if you guys can hear me. So this is our page for the theme for this semester. So what our theme is this semester, all year for this, this school year, so fall 17, winter 18, spring 18, is going to be student focused by design. And then we'll have different themes that go along with that each semester. And this semester's comes from a phrase used by Elder Bednar in his inaugural address called both high tech and high touch. So the idea here is that we're looking at different ways we connect with the students this year. What I wanted to do was go to this inaugural address from Elder Bednar because I thought it did a really good job of discussing the why, of why at BYU Idaho we're interested in being so connected to our students on a one-to-one level, and then why we're interested in using technology as a way to help us connect with our students. So this section was called The Most Effective Teaching and Learning Experiences Occur One by One. And I love this section. He starts out with talking about how the Savior teaches one by one, that he visits the Nephites, and he's visiting 2,500 people, but then he's asking them to come up one by one to feel the prints in his hands and his feet. He's blessing the Nephite children one by one. And it made me think about the times that I've felt like Christ has known me individually and has blessed me in my life. Then Elder Bednar talks about the ways for him it was Rick's College, but it extends to BYU Idaho, that we're able to apply this one-by-one principle with our students. And he said, and this is in 1998, so technology then isn't even what technology is now, but he'd mentioned that some people on campus had come to him with their concerns that both a growing student body, and that's nothing compared to what we have today. We have so many students from all around the world, that between that and technology, they were worried about being able to really provide one-on-one support. And maybe sometimes that's something that we feel online, that we don't get to meet them in person. How can we connect with them one by one? But that's where he talks about the ability to be high-tech and high-touch. That technology, he says, can and should play a supporting and complementing role in our work of educating. If we are wise, we will learn to use technology and the other advancements at our disposal to greatly enhance both the opportunities for and the effectiveness of our one-by-one teaching. And he says that he hopes this would distinguish us from other institutions and help define, he calls it the educational ship of curious workmanship, because throughout this talk he compares education at BYU Idaho to Nephi's ship of curious workmanship, that we're doing something new completely and that we need to rely on the Lord's help, and that he's hoping that we can use technology to help us reach out to our students. Going back to the website, they gave a few challenges that instructors go through trying to develop empathy with students, conversation, connection, and then they gave a few challenges, ways you might want to consider engaging with the theme this semester. One would be to read that whole talk from well, he's President Bednar at the time, but Elder Bednar now. It's a great talk. I'd really recommend it. This article by Brian Goodwin is fascinating, talking about the reasons that our students, even in an online environment, really do need a lot of interaction with us, and then what that looks like. And then they gave a few possible examples, maybe things you'd want to do for a semester theme. Maybe if you have a student who really needs your help that is just not getting it, maybe doesn't understand your group assignments, doesn't understand American heritage. I know sometimes you'll have students that aren't American, and so that's an extra challenge for them because they just don't understand our government. That's not something they've grown up with. Maybe they could benefit from your video feedback or a video walking them through extra resources that they could find. They give an example of calling students, or maybe instead of calling, that you reach out with them emailing individually, saying, hey, just checking in, seeing how I could help. They talk about, I thought this was an interesting one, was to just unplug from distractions. I'm so guilty of that. Every time my email dings, I'm like, oh, I should check what my email is saying. So I thought that was just a really good practical one that's not too hard for us to do, to just, put our phone in a different room or silence it, turn off the email, and just try to really focus on building things with our students. And I want to share my testimony of the power of reaching out to individuals. I've had a few individuals in my class over the years that have really touched me with their dedication to working through really hard times in their lives and trying to better their lives through education. That this is a big opportunity for them to change their life, to change their families' lives, and that when we make those connections with them, we're giving them that opportunity. And I say those things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that is just the perfect mindset to go into a new semester with. I know that I tried to focus on that at the beginning of this semester with our introductory discussion boards. A lot of the time I felt like, okay, I need to get on there and I need to comment on every single one. And once I do that, I'll check that off my box, check that box off my list, and then I'll move on. But I really tried to connect with students and have a conversation. What would I say in response if I were sitting across the table and talking to them, or asking questions, or just wanting to know more about them individually? And it's really amazing how much I found that I had in common, or where paths have crossed. And I really do think that's a big blessing. It might be hard for us because we're thinking, okay, this person is 1 in 50, but for the student, we're the only instructor for the course. And so really forging that relationship really, I think, is important and something that I've been trying to work on. All right, let me see. I don't think Brett was able to make it. I know he had downloaded it on his phone and was going to try and make it to the doctor's office, but I told him, just take care of what you need to do. I think that's a lot to handle. So let me just open up. He sent me an email discussing his one struggle and his success this semester. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so he said what's working well for him so far is getting students to ask questions. I've tried to reinforce the fact that they can ask me questions in my introduction announcement, the first few emails, and discussion interactions. I have had good questions from students so far, and I think that a lot of this has been my efforts to solicit questions. So I think that's great. Opening up that door for communication is definitely something that's going to pay dividends later on. In his challenge, he says, this is partially a consequence of my success. Sometimes students asks about things that are or seem obvious, and it appears that they're not even trying to understand some course basics themselves. Sometimes I'm surprised that the generation raised on tech can't navigate iLearn, and this is usually my younger students, not my older ones. So my dilemma from the two pieces is, how do we be accessible and open, but still foster an appropriate degree of independence and learner responsibility in our students? I think that's a great question. I know Brett's not here, but if anybody has any insight, just feel free to hop in. Take a second to think that over.
I can give you something that I thought of. I try not to, in my announcements for the week, I try not to relink them to every single thing, because I feel like that just is a crutch. So I tell them where to find it. And I say, go to the content page, find your week, and then it will all pop up and it will all be there. And if you get lost, just click on the name of the class and it will go back to the home page and you can try it again. So I've tried to like do that for them so that I'm not constantly the one having to always do that for them. And I feel like I haven't had too many problems with kids coming to me and telling me they haven't been able to figure it out. So I had one that had problems with her video, but I think it was more like she needed to talk to the help people, the IT people. So, but that's one thing that I try to do, is not give them so much that I become a crutch. Probably. So, just one more.
No, I think that's a great insight. Kind of the idea of teaching a man to fish, right? And so they can figure out how to do it by themselves. Any other ideas? I'll just share mine real quick. One thing that I do in my introductory announcement is I post a link to a video. I'm sure it's a little outdated now since we just barely had that update, but it's just like a quick tutorial, just a few minutes long, to show them the basics of iLearn. And I think that I didn't do it my first semester and I got a lot of questions, but I think I've done it every semester since, and it's definitely cut down on the amount of where do I find this or how do I do this type of questions. So that might be something to try to do. Hopefully they'll come out with an update so we can use the newest version. But all right, any other ideas?
Erica added one in the group chat that I think is really good.
Yeah, I have to agree. That's a great resource. I actually didn't use it for that purpose as much, but this semester, for some reason, I've seen a lot of students go and use it without my prompting, which is great because then you see other students saying, okay, great, this answered my question, kind of delegating in a way, taking a little off our plate. And so yes, I definitely think maybe trying, for me personally, to use that more effectively would be a good idea. All right, last chance for Brett's question before we move on. And I'm actually gonna, I think I put this in the email, but I'm gonna be posting this onto the community board. So if anything pops up later into your head, or I'm gonna be directing it towards people who weren't able to make it to the meeting as well, but hopefully we can continue the conversation there. Let's see. Vic, how about answering a question with a question? I think that's a great way to just kind of along the same lines, fostering independence learning, teaching them to teach themselves, especially with this tech stuff. I know that the fall, at least it seems to me that we get a lot more students that are new. So maybe this is why Brett's struggling more, but it's the first semester where I have very little iLearn 3 questions. Good, maybe kids are catching on. Let's see who's next. I think it is Gary. Let me pull up my agenda. Gary. Okay, so I asked Gary. Gary is still pretty new. So when I asked him, he says that he had a few questions he wanted to ask, but he didn't have a success that he was ready to share. And so I thought, I will share one. I actually already shared this with Elizabeth, but it's just something that completely blew me away. I know that some instructors are doing this already, but I just share my personal experience. So this is the first semester that I've offered extra credit to come to the class meeting. And in addition to coming to the class meeting, I wrote a little, I think it was only 4 or 5 questions long, a quiz. So if people weren't able to make to the meeting, if they watched the recording and answered the questions and got it back to me, I'd give them, it was just a couple points of extra credit. But for both, I'm teaching 2 sections, and for both sections, I had over 20 people come to the meeting, which is double what I've ever had in the past. And I've had probably between 20 or 30 students come back with the quiz for the extra credit. So I'm have my fingers crossed. I'm hoping that that will really set expectations and have students come in with that base knowledge rather than having all those questions trickling in, I think, which is what Brett's struggling with. So I'll let you know how that goes, but I was really excited about that and thought I should share. But Gary, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me? Okay, so some of the things that I think are kind of challenging are, one is I have grading essays. I wish that there was a little more guidance on that maybe. I know that there was a discussion about a year ago maybe amongst the instructors about some sort of rubric or what we could go on, but it would be helpful if I could kind of get an idea of what everybody else gives as far as what the grading spread is. Do you give a lot of people 10 out of 20? Do you give most of the people 20 out of 20? And what sort of things you take off points for? Like for me, I get people that write the entire thing as one paragraph, and it drives me nuts. I have a hard time following it. How many points are you going to knock off for making it a 2-page essay, 1 paragraph? I would some more guidance on whatever other people do in that regard. That would be helpful. The other thing I have a little bit of a struggle with is just how to make feedback more meaningful. Just a quick story from my past. I had a relative, about 30 years ago, he became a stake patriarch. And one of the things they did to train him is they had him go to the church archives and read hundreds and hundreds of patriarchal blessings, just so he knew what patriarchal blessings really looked like. And so he would know how that works and what they are. And I think if I had like a resource like that where I could just go and look at somebody that's good at feedback and just read hundreds and hundreds of good feedback comments, I would know what good feedback looked like. I'm not saying I'm bad at it, but I'm not very good at it either. So I'd like to be better at feedback. I'd like to be better at grading those essays. So that's kind of the things I think would help. I've made progress I've only taught 2 semesters now, but I think I've gotten better at it. But anyway, that's what I'm thinking.
No, I think that that's something that is challenging no matter how long you've done it. I've only done it for a year now, but I feel like I'm kind of getting my own groove, but definitely looking at other people who do it well would be, an asset for everybody. It looks like Vic posted the rubric that he uses for his essays. And I use something similar. And I think, what I do is in my first class meeting, and I write a separate post in the questions and conversations board addressing this issue and what I'm looking for. I think formatting is really hard for a lot of students to understand, like you said. But for me, mostly I try to base the majority of the points I give on content, and then I do a few points, maybe I think like 4 or 5 points on formatting. And I really try to drill using a thesis statement. I think these are all tools that they're going to need to learn. If this is the first step, if this is the first overview course, I think that if we can get that into their heads here, it would just be better off for them later on. So that's kind of how I approach that. Anybody else want to share how they approach their essay grading?
Yeah, can I hop in? Something that has helpful in my feedback giving anyway is I've been giving little mini lessons in the questions and conversations section every time that they have an essay due. So I post something about like how to write a decent thesis statement, like maybe outlining is helpful, like what good analysis looks like what kind of supporting information you're supposed to have in your essay. And that way when I'm grading and I see that this stuff is missing and, I can point them to that post in the questions and conversations section so I don't have to type again over and over again, like this is what a thesis looks like, this is a bad thesis. And so it helps me as I grade and hopefully it helps them because they can say, okay, I'm doing this wrong, and there's a whole lot more information over in the questions and conversations section. So that's something helpful for me anyway, and hopefully my students too.
I think that's great, and that's definitely something that you can refer them back to in the feedback instead of typing it out 100 times like you mentioned, just having it all in one place. I think that is a really smart thing to do. Right, anybody else want to chime in?
I would just say that it's important to make sure the students know what your expectations are. And one of the ways to do that is to post your rubric in the lesson. You can do it under the Ponder Improve area. You can edit the HTML and post your rubric right there. I think expectations, as you know, Erica, that's one of the goals I'm working on this semester. I get a lot of students that say, well, I didn't really know what the expectations were in this course, so that's something that I've really been trying to work on, is that they really have no excuse for not knowing what the expectations are. So I think if you post it in the lesson right there as they're beginning the assignment, makes it very clear what's expected.
I didn't know you could do that. I have to go check it out and post it there. I usually post it in my announcement, but I think it's a great idea to have it right where the instructions for the assignment is. They won't be able to miss it. And all right, so we went over the essays. As far as feedback goes, I feel like this is really challenging because you know what good feedback looks like. The only problem is you don't have unlimited hours to dedicate to writing good feedback for every single student. So one thing that I've been doing is, especially in these first few assignments, I kind of see a pattern. I see a majority of the students fall in about like 3 or 4 categories. There's ones who just hit it out of the park, exceeds expectations. There's ones that write good prompts but don't write good comments. And there's ones that engage well with other students, but their prompt is lacking. And so what I'll do is I have 3 basic feedback that address those issues. And so I'll be able to use those in each, if those students fall in those categories. And then I always go through and tweak it to make sure that it's personalized to them. Make sure that I feel like Vic said, with the expectations, it's so important to get that at the very beginning just to set the students up for success. And so I do take a lot of time in these first few discussion boards to really go through every element of their assignment and make sure that I either tell them they're doing a great job on it or show them how to do a better job. It's a lot of work, but I found in the past that it pays off. So any other ideas on managing feedback?
So is there some sort of source where I can read good feedback, or is that not something that's out there?
You could try looking at the online community, but there is a way that you can be an observer for another course. And we can either pair you up with another teacher that does really well on feedback, or if there's volunteers that would add you, the person that is in charge of the course has to go in and find you and add to the course. So if you find somebody or know of somebody that you would like to read their feedback, we can definitely make that happen. I know that
no way of knowing who the feedback guru is, like who's
right. I wouldn't consider myself the feedback guru. Maybe I can look into other sources and see if I can find out who that is.
Okay.
There's actually an instructor course going on right now that's about feedback that I'm in. And it's supposed to teach you how to do better feedback. It's like 4 weeks. And anyway, this is the first week right now, so you wouldn't have missed any. But they're supposed to, there are some little, like they have examples on there that you can read, and they tell you this is good feedback and this is what they did well, and this is good feedback over here and this is what they did well. And it actually is really helpful. It's pretty much what you are saying, is that it's other people's real feedback and you're being able to look at it. So I found it really helpful so far. It's only the first week, but I found it really helpful. And then we all are supposed to contribute some that we thought were good and help each other that way. So.
Thanks.
Yeah, those classes are great. And then the thing Erica was mentioning earlier is called the Best Instructional Practices Collection. If you want to search that in the online community, it has, I'd say, like 10 or 12 examples of feedback from instructors in other disciplines. I'm not seeing any specific American Foundations one, but it does have a lot of different types of feedback. And you can just go on and see those comments. Like, okay, here's good feedback, and here's what they did to do it.
That's the best instructional feedback. No, best instructional practices.
Yeah, best instructional practices collection. And how you can also get there is, if you go to help resources on the online instruction community page, there's a place that says online instruction library, and then it's one of the areas in that.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. That is really helpful. I'm going to go look into those resources too. And I feel like feedback is something that I'm just chiseling away and working on to refine better and better every semester. So thank you. All right. Erica Nelson is our last instructor who's going to share with us. So Erica, if you just want to jump on, we're ready when you are.
All right. So the things that I wanted to talk about are mostly centered around group work, because I feel like that's where I struggle the most, and that's where I spend a lot of my mental energy trying to make my class better, is with the group work. So something I feel like I've done well, or makes things go better when it is done well, is setting good strong expectations for the group to read each other's stuff. I think that's the biggest source of frustration when groups work together, if they don't have an opportunity to have any effect on the final assignment. So something I really encourage my groups to do, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, is to post what they're going to turn into me like by Friday, and have everybody read through it and say if it's okay. You know, somebody should proofread it, somebody should make sure that there's more information in it, because they always need more information, right? And when groups do this, it works really, really well. I feel like the groups learn more from this exercise, and also they're a lot cooler about it when a bad score comes in, because they signed off on it, and so they can't be like, oh, this group later just, you know, host everything. And so that's something that has been successful for me. However, that leads me right to something that I have struggled with and that I'd like to talk to all of you about, is how to get students to meet these expectations and how to help them want to collaborate more, because that's what we are trying to get out of this group work, right? Is we're trying to teach students how to collaborate, and it's something that sometimes happens, and that's great, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's a struggle. So I want to hear what you guys do to make sure that your groups are actually working as a group and not just working as individuals.
I think that's a tough one. I feel like it's one of those things where you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And you can post expectations as much as you would like, but some students just aren't interested. I know that's really frustrating for like my really high achieving students. I feel like I've had group leaders who will volunteer to be group leaders 3 or 4 times in a semester because they can't handle passing that on and risking their grade with somebody else. And I feel like it really puts a really big burden on just one person to do that so many times. And so I think that's a great question. Does anybody have, and I know that Kirst is working with some of the instructors and TGLs on how to do this, and they're revamping the way they're doing group discussions going forward in the next semester, hopefully the next semester, the one after that. So maybe Kirst has some guiding words for us.
Can you hear me? Okay. The questions that a bunch of instructors submitted over the summer were just approved yesterday. So they should go into the course next semester. So those will be implemented. And what I like about them is they're better questions, but also there will only be 3 questions for each lesson. Looking back at instructor surveys, one of the biggest complaints is that it takes too much time, over-contracted time. And so hopefully this will, it halves the number of, discussion board questions that you have to look at or respond to or manage. And plus I just think the questions are better. And so what I just posted, then I just set up a discussion in our course space about how we do push for more collaboration, how we can tweak the instructions to sort of support these new questions and better collaboration.
That's great. I'm so excited. I worked on a few questions and I read over a lot of the questions that people have posted, and they look really interesting. And like I mentioned earlier, Jennifer, I was talking about how this is an overview course and sometimes that can be frustrating, but I feel like these questions really take the discussion to another level and bring in like current events and things, and application is something big that a lot of the questions focus on, which is great. And one question I had for Erica real quick. So I really like the idea of having students post the final product before they turn it in. And I have recommended they do it, but I get hardly anyone to do that. I think it's just an extra step and a lot of people just don't do it. Do you send out reminders? How do you make sure to keep that in the group leader's head at the end of the week?
Well, that's probably something I'm struggling with and something I'd like to be able to do better. But my method so far has been harping on it in the feedback, like just reminding them if a bad assignment comes in, like, look, if you posted this, if you gave everybody a chance to look at it, this would go better for everybody. So it's something I definitely mentioned when I explained how I expect group work to be done, and I tell them up front repeatedly. But then after that, I just remind through the feedback. Not ideal, but
No, thanks. I feel like I'm trying to get that to be the first place they go if they have a grievance with the assignment. Not everybody does that. And Vic says that he sends an email to the group leaders with detailed instructions at the beginning of the week. It's a good place to add that. I should probably do that as well. It's a great idea. Before, I know that we're going to be doing things differently in the upcoming semesters, but as far as this semester goes with getting people to collaborate, I think Matt posted a question, how much do you guys get involved in the discussions? I think that kind of goes hand in hand. At the beginning, for me personally, my last semester's SMART goal was discussion boards, and my goal was to, instead of trying to pepper my comments throughout all the threads in all the groups, to focus on one question for each group. And so there's 6 questions, and I just pick one, and I would comment and make sure they're really getting into the discussion, and I'd come back to it every day. I think my goal was every day from Wednesday to Friday. And then of course I'd skim through the other questions to make sure that things were going well and the ball wasn't being dropped and that kind of thing. But I feel like that was one way for me to kind of jog the collaboration. And if there's one conversation going really well, they have an idea of what that looks like and tries to model it in their other ones. And as we all know, there are just some questions that are better than others. So I would also like to know how you guys get the students to work together. All right, I think there's a lot of good comments being made over here. Playing devil's advocate, it's always interesting. I feel like I've had, I try to play both sides and do both parts, and it's interesting to see student reactions. I just like to keep them guessing with what they think my personal opinion is. I think that can be fun. And make sure no one's posting anything crazy or incorrect. yes, I've had a few issues with that. And yeah, skimming through those is probably a good practice to make sure that that doesn't happen. What do you do with crazy posts? That's a good question. I've only encountered it a few times, so I'm interested to hear from some of you seasoned instructors. How do you handle people that just post? I've had it all sorts of political rants, and they bring in a lot of, a lot of the issues we see today. They try to bring in racism or religion and things like that, and I try to nip it in the bud before anybody can be offended by it. But sometimes it's hard. If you're teaching politics, I think that's going to come out sooner or later. But let's see. Matt says, I encourage the student to take an academic look at the subjects and avoid emotion. That's great. That's great. I mean, I feel like that's what everybody needs to do when talking politics, whether they're participating in the course or not. And I do say that in my course meeting. I do try to outline that there are a lot of hot button issues. There are things that are going to offend some people, not other people. And so just to make sure that there isn't contention. I think there's a difference between academically or civilly discussing something and getting aggressive. And I think that's kind of where I try to draw the line. Jennifer, I think that's great too. And deleting the post and then contacting them. I know that DJ, his bit of advice that he always gives is to contact them privately, not on the board, because sometimes that can really go off the rails quickly. All right, I think these are a lot of good things to share. I just want to wrap up really quick before this meeting goes too long. I know we have a few newer instructors and some more seasoned instructors, but I thought it might be a good idea to go over course evaluations. I'm starting them this week, and I wanted to go over it before I got started just to make sure there aren't any surprises. I feel like our instructor guidelines are pretty straightforward, and so there shouldn't be any surprises, but I just thought it might be a good thing to go over and answer any questions you might have. So let me try to share my screen. Here we are. Okay. So course evaluations, the reason behind the course visit is kind of to give us the opportunity to evaluate your course, me and the people that I report to as well, just to provide feedback to you as instructors and mentoring. So those are the three purposes behind why we do the course evaluations. And there's 4 areas that I'm going to be looking at in your courses that I'm going to be evaluating: announcements, discussion board presence, grading, and feedback. And so I'll go through each of these topics, and I'm going to share with you the questions I'll be asking as I go through each aspect of your course. Let's start with announcements. So, do announcements establish instructor presence? Do they connect students to learning objectives? Do they communicate expectations and encourage students? Are they frequent? I think kind of the rule of thumb is about once a week or more frequently. So just keep that in mind. And then let's see, next, discussion board presence. Does the instructor actively read student posts? Do they respond to student questions in a timely manner? Do they offer clarification and encouragement? Do they extend conversations by prompting students and asking questions? And grading. This one's pretty straightforward. Is the grade book up to date? Does the instructor grade assignments in a timely manner? And are unsubmitted assignments assigned a 0 if it's past the due date? And as far as feedback, does the instructor leave weekly feedback? And I think that applies to our course Between the essays and the group submissions, once we get into the gathering activities, I feel like there's plenty of opportunities for us to give feedback on a weekly basis. Does the instructor provide specific and constructive feedback on how the student might improve? Does the instructor point out what the student did well? And is the feedback relevant? So those are just really quick. I just wanted to overview just kind of things to keep in mind. To me, I feel like these first course visits are an opportunity for us to make sure that you're getting started on the right foot and to help you set you up for a successful semester. So if there's something you know that you're struggling with, or something you don't know that you're struggling with, and something that kind of bubbles to the surface as I look through your courses, after the evaluation, we'll have a chance to talk about it and to kind of brainstorm ways that we can fix some of those issues and resolve them going forward. So that's just kind of a quick overview of course evaluations. I remember when my first semester, I was terrified of my course being evaluated. But after I've done it a few times and now sitting on the other side and doing evaluations myself, I've found more than anything that it's not anything to be scared of. It's a way to open up and have a conversation. So I'm really excited to do that and to take a peek at how each instructor does things differently. Does anybody have any questions? We're coming up on my hour limit, so let's go to our chat real quick. Art has a question. I've had a female student email me and request a group change because one of the male students creeps them out. That is interesting. I've never had anyone request to be switched groups before, but if it's just one person, I don't see why not. If it were me, I'd probably ask who they were just so I would keep them from being in the same group together in the future. I would hate for anybody to feel uncomfortable being on those discussion boards. There's a lot of activity. You spend a lot of time on those boards. If it were me, I don't think I would appreciate being in a group with somebody that made me feel uncomfortable. Anybody else? Any words of wisdom? You checked in the discussion board and there was nothing inappropriate. Huh. Maybe they've been contacting them outside the discussion board. I feel like that's crossing another line. I don't know, maybe have a conversation and see. This might be something you might want to pass on to. Doesn't seem like something that we should be dealing with. Maybe there's somebody else that we can pass that along to and have that checked out. All right, let's see. I think that's all I had. Online support center, maybe that might be a good place to direct them. All right, like I said, I'll be posting these and these questions on the community board so we can continue the conversation. I'll try to get a lot of the details that we had in the meeting as best as I can. But just another quick little plug for our community board. I posted, actually me and Art were talking earlier this week about handling the switch from lessons 2 and 3 discussion activities to lesson 4 gathering activities, and some ways that we can mitigate the inevitable flood of emails that we get with confused students. So I posted on there, and we still have our conversation going from earlier, and then I'll post this one. So don't feel like need to comment on everything. I feel like I maybe am over posting. Maybe I'm a little overzealous as a first time TGL. But if you have something you want to share or something that you want to learn more about, go there. I really am appreciating everybody who's sharing their insights. Right, the quiz. I hold an online class meeting and record it to get the deliberate class ready. That's a good idea. I go over it really extensively in my first class meeting. I don't hold a separate class meeting for it. And one thing that I do that I feel that has helped a lot, I've actually just recently started doing it, is I will set up like a chart for the next 4 or 5 weeks, 4 or 5 lessons, and just assign group leaders so they can check ahead and see if they're coming up in the next few weeks. I also send I think Vic mentioned, maybe it was Matt mentioned, that they send a really detailed email to the group leader. And I feel like that helps too. I've done that. And that seems to at least keep the group leaders feeling like they are a little bit more prepared. Right. The more proactive I am, the less emails with questions. And I think that's right. And I think that's kind of a theme that I'm sensing is the more, if we set expectations clearly and, you know, the earlier the better, that the less questions we get. So hopefully we can find ways to do that. And thank you guys so much for coming. I hope that we were able to help some of you out. And I'm grateful for you sharing your successes and I'm hoping that I'll be able to implement those going forward as well. Could I just get a volunteer for our closing prayer, and then we can close the meeting.
I'll say it, Erica.
Great, thank you so much.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for this opportunity to meet together. Thank you for the wonderful institution at BYU Idaho and the opportunity to teach here at this great university. We thank you for the good students that we have in our courses. We pray that we can love them, serve them, and also hold them accountable for the work that is expected of them. Help us to do our jobs better, Father, and find ways to manage our time with our full-time jobs, our families, and the other callings and obligations that we have. Thank you for the gospel on the earth and for thy many blessings upon us. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk to you. And like I said earlier, I'll be getting started on course visits this week. So, all right. Thank you so much.
Erica, can you just hold on and stay on with me for just a minute? I just have a couple of questions.
Absolutely.
Everybody else can go, like it's not a big deal, but I just had a question for you.
All right.
Thanks, Erica. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Okay, hold on. Give me just a second to stop this recording.